time of the Mexican War, he had to come out here and visit the area. So he knew something about New Mexico, California, all this area down here. So when the Civil War kicked off, he had information out there that he thought he could use over here. Now, have you all read anything about the blockade that was going on the East Coast?
Yeah.
What was it? What was it all about?
The North was blockading the South, so they couldn't get goods.
That's right. They couldn't receive goods, and they couldn't ship their cotton to Europe. That's how they made their money to buy these goods. They were really limited on that, but it took money to run that war. So one of the things that came into Jefferson Davis's mind, along with the commander of his named General Sibley, who also knew about this area because of the Mexican War, was the ports in California. You know, them open water ports out there all along the ocean. And then there was some Southern sympathizers all through this area here. Not a lot, but there was a little bit of sympathy concerning the South. So they thought, you know what, maybe we can ship all our goods out of California. All we got to do is control this area to do it. So they put together a plan. And the plan was to put together about 2,500 soldiers there in Texas, around San Antonio, and send them out here to see if they could conquer this area. A couple other things that were in their mind was the mineral wealth. Y'all know what was going on in 1849 in California? Mining, gold rush, that was all over there. In Tucson, you had silver that was being found. Up in Colorado, there was more gold mining going on. So they were thinking about all this when they decided to send them Southern troops out here. Well, about the same time they were organizing this, President Lincoln, he got a hold of his main commanders. General McClellan was one of them, and he was getting word that something was happening out here. And he told General McClellan, you need to organize a force that's going to deal with this. So General McClellan, he talked to a guy over there in California. His name was Carleton, and he was a veteran of the Mexican War. And what he did is he put together a volunteer force of Californians. There was a few regular army in there, but there was a lot of volunteers. And what their job was going to be was to come out here and stop the Southerners that were coming up out of Texas. Additionally, up in Colorado, there was a force organized up there, Union troops, and they were going to be going south into New Mexico. Roughly, if I remember correctly, there was about 1,300 troops involved with that. So all these big numbers of troops were coming into play when they found this little old place right here. And what they did is whenever the Southern troops got there in New Mexico, the biggest part of them went north to Colorado. But they were worried about these Californians that were coming in. So what they did is they gave Captain Sheridan Hunter about 100 Southerners to move into the Tucson area. So they got into the Tucson area, and as soon as they got there, they found out about a place up here right along the Gila River. Y'all out of Phoenix, right? You ever heard of a place called Zacatone? Well, that's an area that's just south of Phoenix, right along the Gila River. And at that place, there was a mill, a wheat mill. It was also known as the Pima Villages because the Pima Indians, they worked that area. And what they did is they grew wheat. And the mill there was owned by a guy named Ammy White, and he would get all this wheat, and he would mill it, turn it into grain that could be used, and sell it to the local population. He was a Union sympathizer. When he found out the Union troops were coming out here, he started stockpiling all that grain. Well, Sheridan Hunter, over in Tucson, he found out about that. So he sends about 40 Rangers up there, and they arrest Ammy White. Now, while they're there, they find out there's supposed to be a couple of Union troops coming into the area. Well, one thing nobody was getting then was information. Think about how hard it was to travel across this desert. When you look at it now, you got the interstate, you got all this stuff that can get you around. Back then, it'd take days just to go 50 miles or so. And they were talking hundreds of miles they were having to go. So nobody had reliable information about anything. Well, that's what Captain Sheridan Hunter wanted. So over there at the mill, after you arrest Ammy White, they wait a while. Sure enough, one evening, there's a knock on the door. Well, these Southern troops, they go over and open the door, and lo and behold, there's about 2 or 3 Union troops all in blue standing there, introducing themselves. Now, why don't you think they were shooting at each other? Any ideas? Well, you got to think about what was going on out there. These guys that were Texans, a lot of them were Arizona, New Mexico people.
Were they trained?
They were what?
Were they trained?
They were trained. They were trained pretty good in Indian fighting. But what they didn't have was the uniforms. You know, them guys back east, they had money to buy Confederate uniforms. The guys out here, they were running around in, you know, whatever day, every work day where they had. They had shotguns, old beat-up pistols, you know, big old scraggly beards, big old cowboy hats. They looked like a bunch of cowboys and farmers. And that's what these Union troops thought they were talking to, was a bunch of cowboys. So the Southerners invite them on in. And they all come in there and sit down, start passing around a cup of coffee, telling a couple stories. And one of those Southerners, he goes back there and knocks on Sheridan Hunter's door. Says, "Sir, they're here." So Sheridan Hunter, he walks out there and he introduces himself as Ammy White. Now, nobody knew who Ammy White was. So as soon as they found out, oh, this is Ammy White, he's a friendly guy, let's all talk. And that's what he got. It was all the information he needed from the Union troops about them moving all this equipment, people up the river, where they were, how many they were. Once he got all that information, Sheridan Hunter, he just pulls out his pistol and he says, "I'm Captain Sheridan Hunter of the Southern Army. You're under arrest." Captain McCleve, he was the Union commander there. He didn't like that one bit. Well, he didn't have much to say about it, because Captain Sheridan Hunter said, "If you make one move, I'm going to blow your head off." So he stopped everything right there, arrested him, sent him back to Tucson. One of the things he found out was moving through this desert. You know where that Gila River is, right? There was just a little water there, but there was also these old abandoned mail stations that were there. That's how they used to transport mail across this country. All that was left there was a few wells, a little bit of infrastructure, and what the Union troops were doing. They were pre-positioning wheat and other supplies at these mail stations. So they could send about 100 troops or so into this area, use it for a day or two, and move on. Then another 100 or so would come in behind them, do the same thing. So they were just kind of going through the desert using that water from the Gila River. Well, that's what Sheridan Hunter found out about. So what he did is he went up the river, well, with his 30 Rangers or so, burning out all these pre-positioned supplies the Union troops had putting in place. It was starting to slow them down a bit. Well, they got, you know where Gila Bend is?
South Phoenix.
South of Phoenix. Yep, you're on I-8 there, basically going toward Yuma. They got just to the other side of Gila Bend, the Southerners did, and they came to a place called Stanwick Station. And when they get there, there's these two Union soldiers. They're kind of standing there guarding everything. You get Rangers, Southern Rangers, they come in there and just start shooting and shooting and shooting, and they wound one of the Union soldiers. Now, this is at Stanwick Station. Southerners go over a little hill chasing these Union troops, and there's all of a sudden 250 Union soldiers who just arrived on the scene. Well, there weren't no way the Southerners were going to deal with that. So they turned around, hightailed it back to Tucson, and let Sheridan Hunter know they're on their way. And they stopped right here, and they dropped 14 Confederate soldiers. And their job is to watch so that Sheridan Hunter will know exactly when they're coming. Now, you mentioned Stanwick Station there. You'll see that also in there. And it may say a little bit differently, but that is as far west as any organized Southern force ever got in the war. Sometimes you hear people talk about this being the most western battlefield. Maybe. But they did get that far, and there were shots fired, and one soldier was wounded. So now, you got 14 Confederates here waiting. Well, the troops that arrived out there, the Union troops, that 250 or so, they were under Captain Calloway. And they go up to the Pima villages. Now, while they're there, they find out from the local Pima Indians, you got some Southern troops out here in Picacho just waiting on you. What was the thing that nobody had?
Uniforms.
They didn't have much in the way of uniforms, but you remember all the long distances people would have to travel?
Cars. They didn't have cars.
Didn't have cars either, and that made it hard for them to get what?
Supplies.
Information. So now, Captain Calloway knows he's got some Southern troops here that he might be able to get information from. And he comes up with a plan. What he does is he gets 14 soldiers, all cavalry troopers, under Lieutenant Barrett, and they go around the backside of that mountain over yonder. Then he gets another 10 soldiers, I guess it's 12 actually, and they went around the backside of that mountain there, under Lieutenant Baldwin. And what they were going to do is once they got over here, they were going to meet up, basically put up a picket line of troops, fence off that area over there. And when they did that, Captain Calloway was going to come right up the middle of the valley with his 200 soldiers and capture all the Southerners he could find in here. Think that's a pretty good plan? Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? A lot of times plans don't work, though. Lieutenant Barrett, when he gets over here, he's the first man on the scene with his troops, and he's a young man, just a new commander. Needed to prove himself, maybe. But he was waiting, and waiting, and waiting. Nothing was happening. He wasn't seeing Lieutenant Baldwin. He wasn't seeing Captain Calloway or nothing. But he knew the Southerners were here. Now, he had a guy with him who was a civilian guide for the Army. His name was Mr. Jones. Now, Mr. Jones, he kept thinking there might be something going on over here in this area. I need to go forward and look. So he got down on all fours and started crawling through that desert. Maybe 100 yards or so. Think y'all can do that? Try crawling across all this rock and cactus and everything. These guys are kind of tough. But that's what he did. And he got to an area. See that black mountain over there, the little one?
Yeah.
Between there and the interstate, that's where one of those old abandoned mail stations used to be. It's called the Picacho mail station. And that's where just Mr. Jones was heading. He was coming up from that side. When he gets very close to that, he pokes his head up above the bush, and sure enough, there's these Southern soldiers. They're all just kind of sitting around there, drinking coffee, playing some cards. Nobody knows there's a Union troop in sight. So with that, he backs up, crawling through that desert again, where Lieutenant Barrett is, and he says, "Sir, they don't even know we're here. We can take them without firing a shot." Well, for whatever reason, Lieutenant Barrett and Mr. Jones, they didn't get together, didn't get along very well. So Lieutenant Barrett, he just starts going forward on his horse. Well, Mr. Jones, he sees what's about to happen. And he said, "Sir, we don't even need to do this. They don't even know we're here." Lieutenant Barrett didn't listen. He went straight into that encampment on horseback. Had all his troops behind him. Southerners were caught completely off guard. They started throwing down their guns. For whatever reason, Lieutenant Barrett pulls up his pistol, boom, fires a shot. Now when he does, the Southerners think they're all about to be shot dead. So they pull up their guns, and wham, fire a volley into the Union troops. 4 of them come off their horses. Whether they're wounded, killed, we're not sure. 4 went down, and the battle started. From that area there, they fought about a mile along what you see the other side of the interstate there. Surging through all that green brush over there, going down in the washes, shooting like, mad. I mean, they were just trying to kill each other. Lasted for an hour and a half, and went for about a mile. When they got down to, about where you see some of them big trucks over there now on the other side of the interstate, everybody was pretty tired, pretty wore out. The Southerners, they get into this little embankment, this little wash there. They draw up their rifles, and Lieutenant Barrett charges into them one last time with all his troops. The Southerners fire one shot, one volley. Boom! And when they do, one of those bullets catches Lieutenant Barrett right in the neck. Drops him dead just like that. At that point, the Union troops are leaderless, low on ammo, no medical support, everybody's wore out, so they back off about 100 yards or so. The Southerners take full advantage of that. They come back over here about where their horses were tied, and whatever was left of those horses, they picked them up, took them to Tucson to let Sheridan Hunter know that they were on their way. Where were all the other Union troops? Captain Calloway, he was way out there in the desert with 250 troops, and he heard all this shooting. He was really hustling, trying to get up here in time. By the time he got here, it was over. Lieutenant Baldwin, on the other side, nobody heard anything from him until way later in the evening, around nightfall. He apparently just got kind of confused out there. But what the Union troops did have were 3 captured Confederates. And again, information. So Captain Calloway, he proceeds to grill him. He wants to know everything. And he really gets to him, putting the questions to him. Well, after, an hour or so of this, he didn't get a lot of information. He still thought he had about 1,000 Southern troops there in Tucson to deal with. Remember how many we said were in there?